Hey everyone, welcome to another art journal process video. So I've got this page here that I had worked on previously and didn't like what I had made, so I have just covered it with gesso. So you can see on the right hand side there are some colors that still poke through, and I'm perfectly happy with that. So all I'm doing at the moment is, so I've covered both sides with gesso, white gesso, and I'm running a blue gelato along the edges of the page and just squirting it with a spritz of water to help it to dissolve and blend, and I'm just making it blend into the page. So I'm not worrying about having perfect coverage at this stage, because this page is going to be that's just the start of the background, so there'll be lots of other colors added to the page, so I don't need it to be perfect. So with gelatos or with acrylic paints, you can actually come in, if they haven't dried completely, and you can come in with a stencil and a baby wipe and lift off some color off your page. So that's all I'm doing, is I'm taking a stencil and a damp baby wipe and I'm just rubbing some of that blue off. So of course where the stencil is, that's where the blue will stay, and otherwise, most of the color will actually lift away depending how heavy-handed I'm going to be. So all I'm doing is taking off some color, and because what I'm wanting is some of that text to be in the background of my stencil that I'm going to use for the face, and I want some of the color removed. So this is the stencil that I'm going to use. This is another Prima stencil from the Bloom Girl collection, and I'm actually just using a little makeup sponge and I'm putting some black acrylic paint on. So this is just a cheapo acrylic paint that I've had for years in my stash, and I'm not putting it on that flower. So I actually want the flower section to be pink, or so I think, at this point anyway. So as you can see, I'm just using the outer part of the stencil as my little bit of a palette to put this black ink on, and there I go. I'm thinking that I would like to just mush on a bit of gelato, but I pull the stencil and think it doesn't actually look too great. So I'm actually just going to use that as colouring. So there you go. It's not really that great, so I just go over it again with some black acrylic ink, or paint I should say, and I'm happy with that. So I do actually come back in with some colours. So I'm just showing you that I'm using some distress paint now, and all I'm doing is I'm actually just wanting the girl that I have stenciled to be blue, and the rest of the page I'm actually wanting to add some colour to it. So I'm pretty much laying down the paint. It's in a little bottle with a dispenser top, like a little cloth dauber, so I can lay the paint down, and then I'm just moving it with my fingers. So not bothering about a paintbrush at this point in time. I'm just actually putting the paint on and spreading it around with my fingers, which actually makes a really nice effect because it blends in beautifully, and you don't get the bristle lines of a paintbrush. And so just taking this blue further down into the bottom section and doing the same and just blending it all in, adding some, I think it's picked raspberry, which is more of a vibrant pink, and adding that in as well. So at this stage, I'm not really concerned that it's, not looking like it blends in, because there are many stages of an art journal background, and most of them look really ugly. So there's many stages that look really ugly before it actually looks finished, and if I was to stop right now, this would look totally unfinished. But you just keep going, working all the layers, working it all in, and eventually you come up with something really lovely. So I'm just taking another stencil and doing the same technique like I said before, rubbing over the stencil with a damp baby wipe, and you actually can lift up a lot of that colour. So I'm adding texture to the background without adding any more colour. So that is a fun little technique that you can do whilst your paint is still dry. So I've got lots of circles there at the moment, but all those circles will not stay there forever because I will continue to work the background. So I'm wanting to add a little bit more darkness to the left hand side of the page. So I'm just going same technique, a little bit of black acrylic paint. I've just got it on a piece of vellum or something there, using that as a paint palette, and just using the stencil and moving it down, lining it all up. So it's only a 6-inch stencil, I think it is, so you can just maneuver it down again. And I'm not worrying about, you know, perfect placement. You know, I'm not worrying about it being perfect. I just want to have something down on the page. So just drying that up with the heat gun to make sure that the ink is dry, because once it's completely dry, it's not going to move once I add water. So I'm just laying a foundation of colour. Sorry, I'm off frame just a little bit. It's really hard because this journal is so big to actually make sure that it's completely in frame all of the time. So all I did was I laid down a foundation of colour, and with the Neo Colour 2 water-soluble crayons, which are awesome. They just blend so beautifully and they're so vibrant in colour. So you can actually see that I don't have a lot of colour on the actual page, but once I add water, it just, you know, comes alive and is so vibrant, and I'm able just to blend it into the rest of the page and blend lots of colour in. So that's all I'm doing, is just laying down a few colours, and when you see me touch my hand, I'm actually just squeezing the brush, or squeezing the barrel, and just allowing some more water to flow through. So whilst I'm working on the page, I don't have to actually squeeze, but once I can feel that the bristles are getting a bit dry, I just squeeze a little bit of water, and that allows me to be able to blend the colour out much, you know, it just allows it to be much more fluid. So continuing to do that, so just adding some pinks and some purple, and then I add some turquoise, and so they're the 3 colours that I'm using. And so I have no colour on the brush at this point, it's actually just on the page, and I'm just blending it in. So then I decide to take the colours of the Neo Colour 2s and add them to her hair and to her face and start working on her. So just colouring in that beautiful flower and adding a little bit of colour where I think a little bit of colour is needed. And yeah, so now in some places I will actually add the colour straight to the page, and like you can see there, and I just then swap over and add the water with the paintbrush, and then at other times I'm actually just touching the paintbrush to the tip of the crayon and getting colour out like that. So just adding a little bit of turquoise now to that side of the page, because what I want to do is, you know, have the left hand side all blend in with the right hand side. So you'll see me add lots of different colours as we go along. So just, yeah, adding some more highlights to the girl. And you know, why can't people be blue, and why can't they have blue hair? So in my art journal, that's where I can have blue people and I can have blue hair. I can do whatever colours I like, and that's the fun of art journaling, is that we don't have to play by any rules. We don't have to have it, you know, exactly lifelike. So if I want to have a blue person, I can have a blue person. So just adding a little bit more blue to the background as well. And as you can see, those circles that I made by removing some of the paint with the stencil, when I add the Neo Colour 2s, they actually sit on top. So they actually, you know, don't cover up the whole little circles that I've made. So depending on what I put on them, some of them may get covered and some of them might not. So, you know, the background really becomes where you don't know what I've put first. You don't know if I drew the white circles on after the colour. You don't know whether I put the colour there and then put the white circles. So, you know, that's the fun of art journaling, is where you can really look at it and you really don't know what I've done. So you don't know that I've put the colour over the black love hearts. It could look like that the black love hearts were put on after all of the colour has been laid down. So, you know, it's just a fun technique of just, you know, working the page, working the page, working the page until it is, you know, where you're happy to finish and just let it go and let it be, you know, itself. So just adding a little bit of a browny yellow, I think. So adding a little bit of skin flesh colours into this blue so that she's not so, you know, just blue. But, you know, I hope that you can see the text in her face, you know, just the writing, and just gives her a little bit more texture and just, you know, something different about her rather than just being, you know, a skin toned person in colour, if that makes sense. So just going through and adding more colour to the hair, and I decide that I want her hair to be a bit more blue. And as you can see, those crayons, they are just beautiful. So a few people have asked whether I prefer the crayons, water-soluble crayons, over the gelatos, and I would say that I prefer the watercolour crayons. They are very similar to the where is it just gone? The gelatos, thank you. Very similar to the gelatos, except for they are more vibrant in colour. They have more pigment in them, and you're able to move and do more things with them. So the gelatos are really good, just as you saw me at the start, for laying down some foundation of colour, and they're good for being able to rub your finger on top of them and to get a little bit of colour off and add some colour that way. But these crayons, as you can see, I don't need much of a foundation to lay down. Like now I'm just putting a tiny little bit of pink along the edge, but when I add that water, it's actually really, really vibrant. So you get much more detail coverage, so I can actually be more precise where I want to put it, because the crayon has a finer tip rather than the gelato that's sort of in a fat tube. And the colour pigment and the blendability I like much better, and they are roughly, you know, the same price if you buy the gelatos in a big set. So these crayons aren't cheap. Well, they're not cheap here in Australia anyway in the art shops, and I think they are worth it. You can get a cheaper brand called Portfolio that do a very similar thing. They're just a little bit of a fatter crayon, but, you know, compared in price, I would not hesitate to buy those if you are looking for something. Yeah, so anyway, as you can see, I'm just adding some water to the colour that I put down, and so the pink is starting to come out. And if you can tell now, the girl and the background around her is starting to blend into the background itself a little bit more. So the whole page is starting to come together. The whole lot of colours are starting to blend in and start looking more like one cohesive picture and one cohesive element, rather than, you know, lots of different little things that are happening on the page. So this is where I'm adding a little bit of colour with the straight to the crayon and then to the page application. So you can either, like I said, lay a foundation of colour on the page, or take the brush straight, a wet brush straight to the crayon. So it doesn't make the crayon inferior in any way. It just takes a little bit of colour off the crayon, and you're able just to put it straight onto the picture. So at this point in time, I'm looking at the girl, and she starts to look like she's a head just sort of floating on the page. So I probably should have put her maybe lower, but I haven't. So, you know, I've got to work with what I've got right there. So I actually end up making her, which I hope it ends up looking like that, like she's actually swimming in the water. So, but you'll see that when I start to work on that area, and hopefully, yeah, I achieve that look, and you will see that that's what I've gone for. So just putting some more pink around the edges, wanting to bring a little bit of colour in to the edges, and you can see how simple that is. Just run the crayon around, and I'm blotting off with a little bit of tissue as well. So if I'm thinking that the colour hasn't really blended well, or it's a little bit darker than I would have liked, I just actually, you know, blot a little bit off with either a paper towel or just a wet baby wipe, just anything really that's going to allow it to blot and leave some of it behind. So I'm looking now thinking, okay, I'd like to add a little bit of stamping and really define the edges of this page, bring a little bit more black into it because the left hand side has got a lot of the blackness with that stamp. So I'm just going along, and I've got a background stamp from Kaisercraft, and it's just like a wooden fence sort of look. And I'm just making sure that I add that. And then I've got this little text stamp from Prima, and I'm just adding some, I don't know what it says, I think it's in French. And so I'm just adding some text all over the page and just putting it straight onto the girl so that she has some on her skin and in her hair, some on the love hearts, so that the whole page, you know, just starts to come together. So you can see now that it's, you know, really starting to come together and starting to look finished. And I think I'm weighing up whether I want to use that stamp, but I don't think that I do. But I'm adding this really thick white ink, and I'm just using my finger and some water just to help it blend out, and that's just bringing some brightness into the page. You can actually see through, it becomes translucent, so you can see underneath the white, so the white isn't sitting on top where you can't, you know, see through it. And I do end up putting some more stamping on top of it later. So I think this was made, I don't know, maybe like 4 weeks ago, and I'm just getting around to doing the narration now. Okay, so here's where I start to do the water. So I've got a little bit of India ink, and I'm just putting it on my craft mat there and watering it down so that it's not really bright, and I'm just working up some water. So I'm just putting the colour down in that bottom right hand corner underneath the girl so that she doesn't just look like a floating head, that she actually looks like perhaps that she's, you know, swimming in the ocean, and just adding the colour. So I'm actually adding the colour, squirting with water, putting it on, drying it with the heat gun so that every layer of colour is actually dried before the next one. So you can see here my mad like painting and drying skills all at once, multitasking at its best. So what this colour is doing is, you know, just allowing all of the colour underneath to still show through. And there you go. So I actually lost the bit where I put those letters on. So no fear of tomorrow. So, you know, I just, this one really just represented being free and, you know, not fearing the days to come, and, you know, just peacefully going about your day and taking each day as it comes. So there are some close-up shots of the layout, and, you know, you can see lots of the texture in there, and you know, just some finer details. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you spending the time with me and for being here for this long video. I hope you learnt some more techniques, and I hope that you're having fun playing along with me. And I will see you next week for the next art journal. And yeah, I will say bye for now. Bye.